The love affair began when you took me for a rainy afternoon stroll. When you babysat me and let me eat all the cookies. When you threw my hat into the wind. After you sent my mother daisies. Because I could hear your tiny voice. When you taught me to drive. When you held me through the night. The love affair was when I realized throughout my life that love wears many faces. Love is when it touches your heart and it moves you. Love comes in many shapes and from out of anywhere. We just have to be smart enough to recognize it and embrace it and enjoy it. Love is in the air, everywhere. Hello and welcome. This is Sandra Hart at Life Over 60. From the moment we are born, we're all a sum of our experiences, the people around us, our environment, things that happen to us, and also the knowledge that we gain from just life around us and the books we read. Isn't that the truth? We are a sum of all of those things. And I'm going to share with you today 5 books that really have made an impression on me throughout my life from the very, very beginning. I think the very beginning was when I lived on my grandfather's farm when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And my grandfather was a very religious man. And when the Jehovah's Witnesses would walk the back country roads carrying their Bibles and selling Bible stories, my grandfather always would invite them in for supper. And perhaps because he had so many big bedrooms in his farmhouse, he would invite them to stay over, send them off in the morning with a good, fresh breakfast. Now, wasn't that life and wasn't that living? I don't hear stories like that today, and it's really such a shame. But I can remember my grandfather would buy Bible stories from them, and he would buy children's Bible stories. So they had left with us beautiful books of children's Bible stories, and I remember that I would read them, or my grandmother or grandfather would read them to us cousins while we were sitting around them, and those are really, really fond memories for me. But the very first book, or the very first time I think that I can remember reading was one summer after a long summer out on the farm with nothing too much to do except to play with the dogs and my cousins. But I would find a nice comfortable chair, and I remember they had the long, long windows, and I would curl up in that chair. And my mother and father, when they moved to Ohio, they brought with them books that they loved. And one of the collection of books that my paternal grandfather had was the complete works of Dickens. So there are 6 volumes of, no, 5 volumes of these. And I would take these and sit in the corner, and I read each and every single one of these books during that one summer when I was about 7 years old, living in Ohio on a farm. These books were inherited them from my mother and father. And an interesting thing about these books, which I didn't know at the time, these books were printed in 1865, and they just happened to be in the possession of and owned by the sister of John Spangler. Now, John Spangler is the man who held the horse for John Wilkes Booth while he was assassinating President Lincoln. And she has written interesting notes in some of these books. One of them says, "O. Henry considers Bleak House the best of Dickens' works, and remarkably his most indefinitely unusual story." So she has other stuff written down here, but it's just too hard to read, here. But anyway, these books do have a very special meaning for me, not because of who owned them, but because they started me on the love of words. Once I spent the summer reading all of these books, I realized how much I loved to read, how I could lose myself in my imagination and pretend I was living the story inside of these books. And it really encouraged me to realize how important the power of words are. I learned that at a very, very early age, but thanks to the complete work of Charles Dickens. It really was absolutely wonderful, and I'm very grateful for that experience. The next book that is important to me, very important to me, and this is not the actual book, but when I had rheumatic fever as a child, I had it when I was about 12. I was bedridden for months at a time. It became very, very boring for me. So we had a family Bible at home, and I asked my mother if I could please have it by my bedside. And I read that Bible, and I've only done it once from cover to cover. I have read the Bible since, verses and sometimes chapters, but it was the one and only time when I was 12 years old that I did from beginning to end the complete Bible. So that meant so much to me. I really maybe was too young to understand all of the moral lessons that are in this wonderful work of art. But I do remember that so much of it helped shape my moral values when I was 12 years old. So that is one of the other books. Now, these are not unusual books, but to me, this was a book that still is very important in my life and has a lot of wonderful teachings in it. The next book I read when I was about ready to go to New York. And I don't have it anymore. When I moved and I downsized, I think I lost a couple of boxes of books that really meant something to me, that I wanted here with me, but they never arrived. And I didn't realize it till just recently when I was going through my books. And I realized that I know that I wouldn't have given them away, but I'm sure that at least one box I know somehow disappeared into FedEx heaven and it never got to me. But that was Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. Now, his book basically was about, everything that I've talked about and that I still believe in is eliminating negativity from your life, because it makes you depressed. It weakens your resolve to go forward. It gives you fear and anxiety, and it just keeps you from living a full life. So his book that I read maybe when I was about 17 or 18, really, and I read it again in my early 20s, really meant something to me. And I really learned how to live my life. And I think those principles that I read in his book, I have been able to keep most of my adult life and in my old age. And when I went to New York, I joined the Marble Collegiate Church, and he at that time was the minister there. So not only when I was a young girl did I get to read his book, but I was able to go to his church, shake hands with him every Sunday, and feel the power of positivity that was in that congregation and that was in his book. So those are, right off the bat, 3 books that have meant so much to me in my life. Now, the 4th book on my list is a book that was written about a character in the Bible, The Story of Ruth. Probably a lot of you have read it. 12 Moments in a Woman's Life by Joan Chittister, Chittister. And it's the story that brings to life the contemporary lessons taken from the story of Ruth that really is so important and that we can relate to today. And I'm going to read them off because it really is a powerful book, and if you haven't read it, I recommend all of you trying to get the book, go to your library and rent it, or if you want to go on Amazon, wherever you can get one, but it's The Story of Ruth. And it covers 12 important things that we as women need to address in our lives and have faced in our lives many times. The first one is loss. The second one is change. The third one is transformation. And we all have gone through these, haven't we? The fourth is aging, and that's where I am right now. The fifth one is independence. The sixth one is respect. The seventh one is recognition. The eighth one is insight. The ninth one is also important to me. It's called empowerment. The 10th one is self-definition. The 11th one is invisibility, which as we get older, it happens so often, especially to us women. The 12th is fulfillment. These are all wonderful subjects, things that we deal with, and things that we as women who are seeking fulfillment all need to address. And since I'm talking about this book, I think what I'm going to try to do in probably the not too distant future is I am going to take 12 mornings with me, and I'm going to address each and every one of these important things that we as women have to go through, and I will address them every week, one at a time. Because today, we all can relate to Ruth and her struggles, because even though we have become emancipated, we have more privileges and perhaps more respect, but these are all issues that each of us face today. So I think I am going to do a series on each one of these topics in my short Mornings with Me videos. At least I'm going to try. Anyway. And the last book, because I am getting older and I want to lead a healthy life and I want as much information as possible that I can get. And this is Andrew Wiles' book, Healthy Aging, A Lifelong Guide to Your Physical and Spiritual Well-Being. And I have read this book over and over again, and believe me, it's chock full of wonderful advice on your physical, mental, dietary, everything that you want to know to try to live a full and wholesome life as we age is in this book. And I've had it for quite a while, but it really is a great book, and it's one of my 5 books that have really made an impact on my life. Of course, there are other books that I've read that really have meant something to me. In the opening of this video, I also showed A Beautiful Mind. This is a book by Sylvia Nasser. Well, I met Sylvia Nasser, and because I work and do a lot of volunteer work and a member of the National Leadership Council for the Brain and Behavior Research organization. It used to be called NARSAD. It's now the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, they do research on schizophrenia and depression and do a lot of research on all types of mental illness. But I met John and Alicia Nash. We honored him at one event, and I got to sit down and talk with both of them, and I really found them to be interesting, a wonderful, wonderful couple. But I saw the movie before I read the book, and I walked out of that movie, and I was so extremely disappointed because it just didn't seem realistic. In the movie, Alicia stayed with John, even in his worst schizophrenic moments. And I know, as a wife of a former schizophrenic who was a paranoid schizophrenic, I know that that is almost impossible. You cannot do that. That is not a realistic scenario because they become so violent sometimes and they become so someone else that it is quite frightening, and they need to be somewhere where they can be safe from themselves and where that you and your family can be safe. So when I read the book and I met them and talked to them, I felt so relieved and vindicated because she divorced him. They didn't stay together as it was in the movie. She divorced him. She moved away. He moved in with his mother and his sister. And when they both passed away, Alicia still loved him. And when he was rehabilitated and he was mentally a lot better and more well, she went back with him and they lived together. And they did have one son, which is very tragic because he was very, very mentally ill. And their only child has been institutionalized for practically all of his teenage and adult life. You know, schizophrenia does show up when you're 18, 19, or 20. Perfectly brilliant and normal children and do get this illness, which is very, very strange and difficult when they are in their late teens, usually. The tragic part of this is that John and Sylvia were killed in an automobile accident when I lived in New Jersey, and they were killed going, I believe, into New York or else coming back from a speaking engagement, and they were killed in a head-on collision on the Garden State Parkway. And that's a very, very sad ending for me. But I loved them. John Nash was brilliant, kind, very gentle. She was a strong, wonderful, sweet woman. And I really am grateful for Sylvia for putting his story out there. But if you've seen the movie, it's not reality, and it's really too bad. But I feel so much better knowing that she too had to walk away when he was at the height of his madness that happens when you have schizophrenia. So that is some of the books that I have been talking about, and other books like I showed another book written by Paul Robeson Jr. I happened to be on a flight. I think I was going from Newark to Pittsburgh for some reason. I think maybe I had a speaking engagement. And I was sitting next to the nicest gentleman. We had the greatest conversation. And I told him about what I was doing, my work, and being a writer and what I was doing. And he just happened to be the son of Paul Robeson, the great, great singer. But he has written a book, had written a book about his father, and his life with his father, and he was going on dedicating his life to doing good charity work in the name of his father. And then maybe 3 weeks later, I received in the mail a wonderful copy of his book. So he was just a delightful person, and you never know who you're going to meet when you're flying and you're on an airplane. So talk to the person next to you. You might find them very interesting. I mean, if they want to talk, unless they're wearing an eye mask and they said, like, do not disturb me, a big red flag goes up. Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to share with you today. I really love reading. I have a Kindle and a Nook, and some of my books are, all of my books are available on Kindle. But there is something so wonderful about being able to hold a book in your hand, isn't it? I just love the feel of the pages. I love to be able to put in the marker like I have here, and then you close it and you know where you can start again the next day. There's something just so wonderful about being able to hold a real print. It's like a book and mortar store. You know, you're holding the actual book in your hand. Although the others are convenient, books on tapes and Kindles and Nooks, but I still don't think I'll ever give up the actual print book that I can hold in my hand, and then when I'm finished I can slip it up on the shelf in my library. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you have a great week ahead of you. And as I always say, you know, you are very important. You're totally awesome. So do something wonderful for yourself today. And while you're going about it, be kind to someone and share the love. It's really even more important today than ever. So keep that love machine going, and it'll spread. Take care, and I hope to see you soon in my next video. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for coming today.